Hello, I'm Gale Jones Carson with Memphis Light Gas and Water, and today's show, Power Pivot, is a new online series where we talk to Memphis area small businesses to hear their stories about how they have pivoted to a new normal in this pandemic. Local industry experts join us to give advice in areas such as finance, accounting, marketing, real estate, small business grants, legal issues, health, safety, and energy savings. So our Zoom attendees, please put your questions in the Q&A section. Facebook viewers, please put your questions in the comments section. Today, our guests are Pastor Reverend O.C. Collins, who's the head pastor at Bethlehem Church, MB Church. And then we also have Aulton Greene with TVA. He's the Regional Industrial Services Program Manager, and he works with local power companies to provide energy saving opportunities to customers in the Tennessee Valley. Then we have Darrell Cobbins, a former MLGW board member, who's a president and principal broker with Universal Commercial Real Estate, and he provides world-class business, real estate, and consulting services. Then we have Bob Byrd, who's the chairman and CEO of the Bank of Bartlett, who offers small business and consumer-focused products and services while differentiating themselves through quality service. So Darrell, we'll start with you. If you could give us some information about what you do and how you work with small businesses, and what can you share to help them during these pandemic times?
Sure. My name is Darrell Cobbins. I'm a third generation real estate professional here in Memphis. My company is Universal Commercial Real Estate. I've been in the local commercial real estate industry for 19 years. Started out with the Cushman and Wakefield office here and began as an entrepreneur in 2007. And my experience in the commercial real estate industry has been with the FedExes of the world to mom and pop organizations and everything in between, including church and faith-based organizations. And my job really is to help organizations make good real estate decisions. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I tell prospective clients is that when you look at your budget, oftentimes second to your personnel, your property expense or your occupancy cost is often the second largest line item in your budget, which tells you how important that is to a business and the decisions that they make associated with that.
Okay, so next we will move to Bob Byrd. Bob, could you tell us something about yourself and your business and how you work with small businesses? And then after you introduce yourselves, then we will go back to Pastor Collins so he can tell us about himself and his church and tell his story and how he's been dealing with these trying times for businesses. So Bobby? Bob, you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks again for inviting me to join you all. It's always an honor to be included with such nice people and such accomplished people. We started Bank of Bartlett about almost a little over 40 years ago. And in that period of time, we have focused upon small and medium-sized businesses and the consumer banking needs. In that period of time, we've lent about $5 billion in home loans and home mortgage lending. And we have financed about 200 churches. There are either from ground up or refinance and renovation. And just a little snippet of something that gives you an idea of, we give you an idea of where we try to focus. When the PPP or the stimulus money was available for professionals and small businesses, we lent about $65 million to almost 1,700 different borrowers, including churches. And this was for the first time in that 40 years in my 7 decades on this earth I've ever seen a government program get to where the rubber meets the road, where, I mean, getting into real people's hands. We're all accustomed to seeing Wall Street banks and investment companies getting bailed out. We see automobiles, and we see all kinds of tax credits that go here, there, and everywhere. But this is the first time I'm happy to say, at least I've seen it this one time, where we have had an opportunity for a wide array of professionals and businesses to recapitalize with government money. So let's hope that there's another round of stimulus. Let's hope that the forgiveness portion of this works out well, so it is free money or money without recourse. And let's hope that this effort to get economic stimulus at the ground level really makes a difference. And I'll hold my thoughts from there until asked.
Okay, so Aulton, would you please give us some information about yourself and TVA and how TVA is working with small businesses during these times?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Aulton Greene. I'm with TVA. I've been with the company since 2005. I've had the pleasure to be in Memphis my total career. So work with Candace and Tarek and some of the other staff. They do a lot for the community. Our goal as TVA is to ensure people are able to survive and be ready for the re-entry when this whole thing changes. A lot of customers from our programs, like we've had energy efficiency. We did that for 10 years to help save energy. We've installed lighting and HVAC in small businesses. So the new thing we have now is UVGI, and that's where we're installing lighting in the HVAC systems for our commercial customers. So a lot of people are ready to get back. I know, I'm pretty sure Pastor Collins or Reverend Collins, when his church members come back, they want to be safe in these, inside these facilities. So from churches to schools, grocery stores, we have incentives. So right now the incentives is $30 per ton. And we'll get that information out to the MLGW staff where customers, I guess our commercial customers, we really don't have anything for residential customers at this time, but we do have some commercial incentives that could help out through this process.
Okay,
and,
so I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I apologize.
No, are you through?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, so Pastor Collins, this pandemic has hit small businesses throughout this country very hard. Many have had difficulty coming back financially. And in the church community, many of you all are not meeting in person at church. So could you please tell us how is Bethlehem working with their sheep, and how are you handling these times physically and spiritually?
Thank you, Gale, and thank all of you who are part of the panel today, and all of you who are listening. We thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is O.C. Collins. As it's already been stated, I am the pastor at Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church, and have been there now 35 years. And so we just thank God for the opportunity to serve. But to get to the heart of the matter that Gale asked me, how are we coping with this new normal? We're coping. I know that sounds crazy, but we're coping. And what I mean by that is every day something changes when it comes to the numbers that are going up, when it comes to what's available in the community. We're in the midst of a voting season now, and just about everything that happens affects the church in a certain way. We're different from maybe what Aulton and Darrell do, because they have a commodity. They can deal in things that they can buy and sell, or offer and sell, or offer and give. But as far as the church is concerned, we basically depend on the goodness of out of the hearts of those who are members of the church. We did not fall back on trying to take a loan or anything like that, even when the PPE money came out, because so far our members have been very, very kind in continuing to give. We have impressed upon our members, and we've done this even before the pandemic hit, that the church is not the building, but the church is the people. And I think our people have really embraced that idea. And so far as the finance is concerned, of course, we can see the difference in finance because people have don't have the jobs that they had before. Some have shortened hours, and now the children are at home being educated, and this creates another financial burden upon the members of the church. We understand that. That's why what we have done, Gale, is make sure that whatever is given to the church, that we practice good stewardship. We have made sure that our obligations, the bills that the church may have incurred prior to the pandemic, we have a good staff of officers who work with the finance and make sure that all of those financial obligations have been met. And I think because we have taken that approach, we are still able as a church to give monthly to the Mid-South Food Bank. Now,
Right.
Yes, we are, and I want to thank our members, those who are listening. Y'all continue to do that because it's a help. And the reason we didn't try to create any ministries of our own within the church, we looked out to see who was doing what. And if somebody is doing delivery to the community or helping in a certain way, there was no reason for us to reinvent the wheel just to get on television and say, hey, look what we're doing. Look at what we're doing. We just want to do it and make sure it gets to the people who need it the most. And so far that has worked out for us. And now I know you're going to ask about whether or not we're back in the building. No, we're not. We're still doing virtual service. And I announced to our congregation that we will be virtual until we have gotten some clearance, not only from the medical experts, but also from the Holy Spirit. For that is what we believe before we would take the risk at this point of bringing anybody into our building and that become a cluster, a spreading place for the coronavirus. So that's basically, Gale, a little bit of what we're doing. I'm sure there's a lot more, but I want to stop there.
So you're having service virtually? What,
Yes,
radio, TV, online?
Yes, what we're doing, thank you. Yeah, we're doing our Facebook broadcast on Sundays at 10:45. So if any of you all would like to, it's Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church at 10:45 on our Facebook page. And we also do our Sunday school Bible study on Wednesday at midday at 11 o'clock. We have a conference call as well. We have a number that you can dial in, and those, of course, all of that is on our Facebook page. And you look, and if you don't have a computer or any way that you can visually get with us on Sunday, we have the conference call operating simultaneously with the Facebook broadcast. So it is the thing that we're really missing is the community, the sense of community where we all get together. But I can say this, it would appear that our members are really demonstrating what we preach, and we're practicing what we preach, and that is that we don't necessarily have congregated to be a congregation. So that's where we are.
Okay, so Darrell, what kind of advice or suggestions would you provide to Pastor Collins or other ministers who may need some advice during these times?
Well, as it relates to real estate, I think Pastor Collins sort of hit the nail on the head as it relates to how we congregate and how we come together and how cautious we have to be right now. But as Aulton mentioned, that there are solutions that are coming down the pike for church organizations and other organizations that own property to be able to look at your ventilation and HVAC systems, to think about how airflow and occupancy and how you establish the functions within your space outside of the sanctuary and including the sanctuary. And so just rethinking how we bring people together and how we put different functions of a particular office or church facility in play once we come back. I think is some forethought that could be occurring just to make sure that even after we get the green light, that we're still practicing and being as safe as we can be.
Yeah.
Okay, so to piggyback on what Darrell was saying about some tips like the AC and those kinds of things, Aulton, what would you suggest to churches and any small business on ways that they can save so that they can help cut their energy consumption, thus reducing their energy cost?
Yes. First, I think thing will be to come up with a plan. Times are changing. I know previously you would have church service. I know from like you might start at Sunday school to maybe 5 o'clock. It kind of depends on your church. You might go through in the week. You might have Tuesday night Bible study. Wednesday, you might have choir rehearsal. So it could be different things, the way that they utilize the facility. So I will come up with a new game plan so they have a set schedule on times where they could be in the building. Also, with the help of the UVGI and cleaning supplies, maybe they can get that filtered air through the building, depending on the occupancy. So you would have to kind of set a schedule to where you can have your maximum amount of people in that space. Then once you can clear out, clean, let the air filter, then you can maybe bring in another group for another activity. So that's really like the new thing is to plan, because with energy savings, you have so many opportunities. Now you have new HVAC, you have LED lighting. So there's a lot of opportunities for the customers to kind of find a new way of life, because I don't think it'll be the same. So we really have to plan and come up with a good game plan on how we're going to utilize our space and for that time. And also we have, I think Candace posted at energyright.com. We have some restart guidelines on our website and also some education on the COVID virus. So they could also help kind of push, customers in a certain direction, so you don't have to just start from scratch. There's some information out there for you to be able to kind of give you a baseline on where you want to go in the future.
Okay, thank you for that information. So Bobby, what are some of the things specifically that the Bank of Bartlett could offer or share to the church community, as well as small businesses regarding finances, PPE, loans, financially, what is it that you can suggest to help them?
Well, Gale, I think that that sound business management, whether individual or collectively as a spiritual organization or a business, begins with sound budgeting and discipline going forward. So there are a few things that we counsel people to do always, and that's to have if you don't have savings put aside and you're into the middle of this pandemic and the conditions that imposes, restrictions or impediments that it imposes on financial capacity, then that's a tougher time to say, well, you should have saved some money. But here are a few things that I would recommend. I think it's Warren Buffett that said, to get wealthy, you live below your means and invest the rest. So a way to get at this, and I am impressed with what Pastor Cobbins said, and perhaps it's someone else, that churches have been remarkably resilient. We bank some of the larger churches, and for example, in Bartlett, but we also bank several African American churches, and I'm impressed at how resilient contributions, tithings, revenue for the church has been, and I am greatly, frankly, surprised by that, and mostly I'm impressed by that, because it says that people really mean what they say, and it is true that the church is not the building, but the people and the spirit of the people within it. So here are a few things that I think that churches should look for. look at your balance sheet first. If you have debt on cars and vans and things that are short-term amortization, and if you have borrowable equity in the real estate, most of the time, if you borrow money on real estate, it will be for a longer term, and therefore your payments of principal and interest will be less. As a perversely positive thing of the current situation, interest rates are what we call zero interest rates, because that's about how much we get on what we charge for loans and everything else. I say that to be half funny. But if you look at 20-year real estate loans now, that for churches, if you have leverageable equity, meaning you can borrow against equity in that building and pull out some operating capital, and if you look at what I think you could lower the payments, or perhaps on debt that you already have, and restructure debt on vans, equipment, everything from musical instruments to vans to take people back and forth, or even kitchen equipment. If you can substitute for that shorter term collateral the longer term real estate in the church, then you would have a really good chance of lowering your monthly payments. I also think that being very careful about budgeting. It's a time to people have had to tighten their belts, and there's times for sensible, forward-thinking, and intelligently managed organizations, and that includes most of the churches I know. They know when to tighten the belt, but tighten the belt on things that are, shall we say, elective. You don't want to tighten the belt on feeding people who are hungry, or giving people rides to the doctor who need it, and those kinds of benevolent activities. Benevolence, at my observation after 40 years of financing churches, is that benevolence is the best activity to create new members and new tithing. But I would say that perhaps the most important thing that I would recommend is get your more knowledgeable people, your finance committee, together and go over what your actual church balance sheet looks like, and see if there are ways that you can restructure short-term debt and take it into longer terms, and look at your rates. Rates are very low. You might be able to refinance the church debt into longer-term real estate where you have lower monthly payments. Now, let me offer a couple of observations atop that I think are really, really, really important. Banks lend money, and after 40 years, I often kid, only half kiddingly say, that I've got banking boiled down to 4 questions. Can they pay us back? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, will they pay us back? While this wouldn't apply to churches, it applies in a lot of other places. I say, is it legal? And number 4, does the bank, as the lender, make any money on it? So, to prove can you pay me back? That means that you have you're being able to show it with sound financial accounting on paper, preferably prepared. Most churches have a CPA or some knowledgeable finance people who are good at preparing statements, and then create a history of doing that, because most lenders want to see seasoned statements that are out there for a couple of years, so that the persistency of that ability to repay is there. So, kind of a summary, look at your balance sheet, see if you can restructure your debt to longer term at these lower rates, then look to see if you can or should refinance that debt, and then make sure that you have sound accounting that's professionally prepared and persistent, and so that you persistently have that available, because that will impress whatever lender is talking with you. And I also think that managing the funds, keeping banks are very, very, bankers are skeptical by nature. If there's cash to be had, we like to know that that cash is on deposit somewhere, not in a can, not in a vault or something. We need to be able to see and account for all the liquidity for any borrower, and that includes the church. So those would be the primary things that I would point to, but it goes back to the underpinning of being disciplined, well budgeted, and managing the balance sheet to the best possible outcome.
So let me ask you this, Bob. So you were saying that it's wise to restructure or, I guess sort of use the interest or, well, not the interest, but the finances that you have in your building. Suppose you don't have any equity or little equity. How do you make decisions then for small businesses to take out the funds that they need to?
Well, for small businesses, the lender of the last resort is you go to Small Business Administration guaranteed loans. And basically what that means is that there are some programs where you go directly to SBA and apply there. And so much, Gale, so much of this information now is readily available on Google, so you can hunt back and find most of it. But what's called the 7A program of banks, if a small business goes to a bank, then the bank will pay more careful attention if we're able to underwrite it through the SBA 7A program, which means, of course, that the SBA will guarantee up to 75, sometimes 80% of the amount lent. And that is a consideration for lots of reasons, because we're only hung out there for 20% of the loss. We would be, if there's a loss on a loan with the SBA, we're not completely covered. We're exposed to that 20%, and the SBA covers the 80%. But I think, once again, really good record keeping, having a really good business model. If your business is a poor business model and the margins are not there, there's no amount of discipline, budgeting savvy, or whatever that can help a business that's not going to make it. And sometimes we all have to have the courage to know when something is not going to work anymore and to redirect talents. But I think that if you're without equity and what you're working on is sweat and hard work, and you have a good idea that has promise, that has margins, then approach your lender with the idea, say, I'd like to go to SBA directly first for some of the more, for those that are really up against the wall. But if what you have is a short-term setback, or you just need capital for growth, and you just don't have the capital for growth, then that's where you go to either directly to the SBA or to a bank who would help use the SBA to help you get that done.
Okay, so Harold, would you during these times recommend to any church or small business to even consider maybe purchasing new property for a building, for new church? I mean, what would you tell them to stand firm, don't move during these times?
Gail, I think that's probably going to be, first of all, fact specific. I note that a number of, particularly in the African American church world, we're beginning to see churches create satellite churches. and there are a lot of empty church buildings out there, unfortunately, right now. So I think the answer to your question is going to be fact specific, and it's going to depend on the can they pay me back part, will they, and so forth and so on. But if they have the capacity and have room within their budget to go out and there's a perfectly wonderful loan application that you go to the App Store and pull down. It's called Loan Calc, LOANCALC. I have it on my phone all the time. So let's say that someone wanted to go borrow $250,000, and I'm putting it in this loan calc now, and they're going 20 years, and let's be conservative and say that we're going to have a 5% rate on that. Then that means that that's $1,650. You probably throw another couple $100 on there since you don't pay taxes for insurance. You're talking about $1,850 a month. So, Gale, if someone is renting space for a church, that would be a perfect time to say, look, this will help us figure out how much building we can afford to go buy. And there are a lot of empty boxes of shopping centers, strip centers, and a lot of those are going to be more of those are going to be for sale. So I think if you can nail down what you're capable of paying for, I always think it's a better idea to own than to rent. If your location is something that's permanent and you feel good about the place and neighborhood and purpose of where you're going to be, then in 20 years you pay for the building instead of paying somebody else who's going to own the building that you're still renting. So yeah, I think right now it is for home buyers, it's a seller's market right now for most commercial types of loans, including churches. It's really a buyer's market right now. So if you have the capacity, right now is the time to go think about it.
Okay. All right. So, Pastor Collins,
Yes,
would you? Okay, it seems like you may have had some challenging times, but you've done very well with your strategic planning. What are some suggestions that you would make to some other churches?
Well, one of the things I think that we started off with, Gale, and we still live by this, is we have to separate what is a necessity from what is a luxury. And, we suggest that to our members to try to keep their heads above water financially as well. And I was listening to Mr. Byrd, and by the way, we're one of Mr. Byrd's customers at Bethlehem Baptist Church. And so you have to separate what is a necessity from what is a luxury. And I heard Aulton talking about how, the church building is used for rehearsals, for meetings and things like that. We have during this period, and even before this period, we were having meetings with our deacons and trustees, preparing. We've been having meetings with them in retreats and all of that prior to this, planning of what to do in case of a catastrophe. We did not know the pandemic was coming, but we had some things in line that fit what's going on now, and we discussed basically what's a necessity versus what is a luxury. And so what we've done, and I go back to what Aulton was saying about the meetings. We've looked at what meetings are actually necessary. Even when we come back and this pandemic is over, we still want to be as financially savvy and smart with the funds as we are now. And so listening to him talk about the things that are coming into the arena when it comes to using the church facilities, we have to now say, you know what, when we come back, I think we need to take a look at this and take a look at that. And it's not that you don't want to serve your people because they give, because they want the best in service. But I think they have bought into the reality, Gale, that there are some things that we were doing just because we were doing them, and that they were really steeped in tradition rather than steeped in necessity. We were doing some things because that's the way mama used to do it, and that's the way daddy used to do it. And so we have to present times to people and say, well, you know what, we can't do that anymore. Give you an example. We know that it's not practical to hold repasses at the church anymore after a funeral service where people all come to eat and they all gather and all of that. So we had to determine how can we still give to our people what we feel like they would deserve if they had had the chance to do it. So no, we can't give them a gourmet meal at Chez Philippe, but we can give them some compensation that they can have something. And so what we're looking at going back into the church is that should we even have repasses at all, even after we come back into the church? What has been more effective for the families? And we've discovered that what we have done virtually has really brought people more closer together than it has separated them. And so there are a lot of things, and the budgeting is part of it. But again, to recommend, if I could really recommend something to any church that's listening, look and see what are your necessities versus what are your luxuries. And necessities are a must. Luxuries are something that you can dream about.
Okay, so thank you so very much for that. So, Aulton, is there anything that you would like to recommend right now before we begin closing?
Yes, ma'am. First, I want to say thank you to everyone to be a part of this panel. I really enjoyed it. One major thing is work with your MLGW staff. I know a lot of times we have customers who don't know who to call, and they kind of go down a rabbit hole trying to find some solutions. So first, I would say contact the staff at MLGW. They have all the contacts in the city. They work with everybody from, as you heard today, from economic development to realtors, construction. They have a connection with someone. So first start there. Also too, we have different services for our commercial customers, and it's like an energy audit, what we call a level 1 energy audit. So when you go through your game plan on going back or re-entry, work with them, and maybe we can come out and do a walkthrough of the facility and try to find some of the necessities, or get rid of some of the extra equipment. If you're gonna have a smaller service, you might not need a piano and an organ and a keyboard and a loud system. So it might be things that you can change, even lighting and HVAC and around the facility, that will help you save energy. So a level 1 audit would be kind of like just a base level audit, just to kind of do a walkthrough and find some opportunities to save energy.
Okay, so thank you so very much for that. So Darrell, what suggestions do you have for churches and small businesses before we end the show?
Well, I would say a lot has been discussed about planning and strategic planning and budgeting. I think, as we mentioned earlier, with your real estate being one of your top line items in your budget, feel free to call your friendly real estate advisor to give you some insight as to what's happening in the marketplace and what advice would be appropriate for your particular situation. And I think every organization, churches, small businesses, everybody's situation is different. And there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to problem solving around real estate and property use. But with the help of an astute advisor and counsel, you can make the best decisions that are appropriate for your particular situation.
And so you could help churches and small businesses make decisions on whether or not they should stay, or look for a smaller property, or some other suggestions on location.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll be happy to. Thank you.
Okay, so Bobby, as we end, is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewing audience and also with churches and small businesses? Harold, Bobby? I think he's on mute. Okay, so as we come to a close, I want to thank.
Sorry, Gale, that I was unmuted there, and
okay.
I was muted, and I nearly brought thumbs trying to get it.
Okay. Yeah. So do you have any final suggestions? Okay.
Just a few things. I think mentorship is really important, and Pastor Collins is very kind to point out that we're privileged to have him as a friend and customer. He and my brother Harold have been friends for a very, very long time. I do think that there are a lot of really, really well-run churches, including what Pastor Collins does and his folks there. There are others who are doing really well. So sometimes just don't be bashful about asking for advice and counsel. We're always happy to at Bank of Bartlett. We want to try to help everybody that we can, and communication is a wonderful thing. So I would say whatever the business or the church is wondering or worried about, you probably know someone who is really good, who's already doing what you're doing, that can help you. And I could name off a dozen ministers, and I would start that, but I wouldn't keep going because I wouldn't want to offend anyone that I left out. But just as you do, Gale, with all the great work that you do, there are a lot of other great communicators in the marketplace. They're great restaurateurs. And one thing I've noted in this pandemic is how willing people are to even help their competitors. And I think that's a great thing that we're seeing in the community right now. So just reach out and ask for help is what I would say.
Okay, so thank you very, very much. And I do want to, I never want to overlook thanking our all of my colleagues who work with us on these shows to make them successful. And that would be IT staff, Nathan Smith and Darren Sharp, and then our economic and community development team, which is headed up by Terica Lamb, and then we have Candace Spicer, and we also have Cynthia Haley. I want to thank each of you as we make sure we have information out there for our business community, for our small businesses, for our churches, as we go through these financial challenges with this pandemic time. So we will continue to bring information and shows to our customers, small, large, and residential customers. So thank you so very much. We will get you information on when our next show will be, and the next focus will be on the county and the city funds that are available for small businesses. And so we'll get that information out to you and who our guests will be. Thank you so very much for watching our show today.